There are three different ways that we can access our routers for administrative purposes. One of the ways that we can access them is via the console port. Now, the console port by default has no security implemented on it whatsoever. So it's very important that we set up at least a line password that can be utilized for authentication purposes. Most users fail to implement the security that is necessary at this stage. They think, well, the console port is a physical port. Since my router is locked in a secure room, there's no way that somebody would ever be able to access the device via the console port. You shouldn't have that attitude. Security is very, very important. So therefore, set up at least a line password on the console. But if you're using AAA authentication, then you have a AAA method list for the console port that's going to indicate that under normal conditions, a AAA server is going to be required, like a TACACS Plus server, to authenticate users connecting to the console port. Let's give ourselves a scalable authentication solution. But here we're just showing you a simple way that you can set up a line password so that way there anybody connecting to the console port is going to be at least asked to enter a password. So we need two commands in order to accomplish this. The first command is the login command. The login command tells the router to ask the user for a password. That's literally what it's saying. It's saying, ask the user for a password. Without the login command, then the router simply says, hey, I don't have to ask them for a password, therefore they automatically gain entry into the device for management purposes. So make sure this login keyword is there, and then after that, specify your password. In this case, this password's not all that great. Let's make sure they're much better in the real world. Our VTY lines are utilized for remotely managing our routers. Our default VTY lines are 0 through 4, so there's 5 default VTY lines, but you can get routers with more than that. You might see a router that has line VTY 0 through 4, and then line VTY 5 through 15 is an example for a total of 16 VTY lines. However, it still technically only has 5 default VTY lines 0 through 4. Now, the login command for the VTY lines is on by default. It's there right out of the box. So you do not have to specify the login command. I would not remove the login command, though, because the login command says ask the user for a password. If you remove the login command with the no login command, what will happen is that it's not going to ask the users for a password. So they'll automatically gain entry to the device from remote locations, and we don't want that to happen. We at least want, at a minimum, a password asked of that user. So in the real world, what are we going to want to do? Well, we're going to want to use a scalable authentication solution, AAA servers, making sure that users are authenticated via a username and a password via that authentication server. But in this case, you can see just simply with the login command and password Cisco, we get at least a basic entry-level security on our routers. And then our aux ports, those are utilized to remotely connect to our device using a modem. And we can see that we're allowing access to the exec mode. And so therefore we're setting up our logins, we're setting up our passwords, and the login is what? The login says ask the user for a password. So we definitely want to make sure that our lines are up and operational. So this exec command is actually turning on this aux line. That's what it's doing, this exec command. And then we're saying ask the user for a password, and then we're giving it a password of Cisco. Again, not very strong. And the last thing we ever want to do is have the same password used for all types of connections. Now, these passwords are going to be stored in plain text within the running config. So how can we encrypt them with just a basic level of encryption? We can use the service password encryption command, service password encryption. What this command does is it makes sure that all current plain text passwords in the running config are now encrypted, and all future passwords that are created using the password keyword will be encrypted as well. If you want to remove this functionality, you type in no service password encryption. However, does it decrypt the passwords that are currently encrypted? No, it doesn't. It doesn't do that at all. It simply says any new passwords that are created using the password command will not be encrypted, but those that are already encrypted will stay as encrypted. There's a better way, though, to secure your passwords in the running config, and that is by using the secret keyword. Here's an example where you typed in enable secret instead of enable password. What enable secret does is it will generate a hash value of the actual password string. So that way there, the hash is stored in the running configuration using various hashing algorithms depending on your router and the operating system you're using. The version of the operating system, it could be MD5 that's being used or SHA-256. Newer operating systems are using SHA SHA-256. So much better solution. Same thing with usernames and passwords when you're setting up your username and password database. Instead of typing in username, the name, and then password and giving a password, type in username, the name, and then secret, and then the password that goes along with that, because that'll give you the ability to hash those passwords instead of storing them in plain text and relying on this weak service password encryption to encrypt them.